The year was 1861. The United States of America, once united under a single flag, was tearing itself apart. Cannon fire echoed across southern fields. Brothers fought against brothers. Over 600,000 lives would be lost before the conflict was over. The Civil War had begun, not just a battle between North and South, but a struggle for the soul of a nation. At the center of this storm stood a tall, quiet man with deep-set eyes, a heavy heart, and a burden unlike any other American president before him. That man was Abraham Lincoln. When Lincoln took office as the 16th President of the United States, the nation was already fractured. 11 southern states had declared secession after his election. They saw him as a threat, not just to slavery, but to their way of life. Yet Lincoln's goal was not war. His goal was unity. He believed that the United States was one nation, indivisible, and that preserving it was not just political, it was moral. But who was Abraham Lincoln before the weight of a nation rested on his shoulders? To understand the president who led America through its greatest internal conflict, we must go back to his beginning. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky. He came from humble beginnings. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a farmer and carpenter. His mother, Nancy Hanks Lincoln, died when Abraham was just 9 years old. Life on the frontier was harsh, and Lincoln grew up surrounded by manual labor, limited schooling, and constant hardship. Unlike many of his peers, Lincoln had a deep hunger for knowledge. Though he received less than a year of formal education, he taught himself to read, write, and understand law and literature. He read the Bible, Shakespeare, and law books by candlelight. That passion for learning would shape his thinking and his politics. As a young man, Lincoln moved to New Salem, Illinois. He worked odd jobs, rail splitting, storekeeping, surveying, and eventually studied to become a lawyer. He earned a reputation for honesty, earning the nickname Honest Abe, and began practicing law in Springfield, Illinois. But Lincoln's ambitions reached beyond the courtroom. In 1834, he was elected to the Illinois state legislature, where he began shaping his political views. He was a member of the Whig Party and firmly believed in economic development and infrastructure. But most importantly, he opposed the expansion of slavery. In 1846, Lincoln entered national politics, winning a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. There, he criticized the Mexican-American War and the extension of slavery into new territories. But after one term, he stepped away from Congress and returned to his law practice. For the next several years, Lincoln focused on his family and career. He married Mary Todd in 1842, and together they had 4 sons, though only one would survive into adulthood. Lincoln might have remained a regional figure if not for the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This law allowed new territories to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery, repealing the Missouri Compromise. It shook Lincoln. He returned to the political stage with renewed purpose, seeing the spread of slavery as a threat to the nation's founding ideals. In 1858, he famously debated Senator Stephen A. Douglas across Illinois. Though Lincoln lost the Senate race, his speeches gained national attention. One line stood out: "A house divided against itself cannot stand." It was more than a metaphor, it was a warning. By 1860, the newly formed Republican Party nominated Lincoln as their candidate for president. He represented moderation. He was not calling for immediate abolition, but he stood firmly against the expansion of slavery. His election triggered panic in the South. Before he could even take office, several states had seceded, forming the Confederate States of America. Lincoln was sworn President of the USA on March 4, 1861. Just over a month later, the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. The Civil War had begun. As President Lincoln walked a tightrope, he had to balance war efforts, political factions, and public opinion. Early defeats tested the Union's morale. Many questioned whether he was up to the task. But Lincoln grew stronger with each trial. He was not a military man by training, but he learned quickly. More importantly, he never lost sight of the Union's cause. As the war continued, Lincoln's position on slavery hardened. He came to see that the Union could never truly be whole while slavery still existed. On January 1st, 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all enslaved people in Confederate territory were to be set free. As the war raged on, one of its bloodiest turning points came in July 1863 at the Battle of Gettysburg. The Union won a victory, but at terrible cost. Over 50,000 casualties in just 3 days. Months later, President Lincoln stood on that battlefield among the graves of thousands and delivered a short but immortal address. In just 272 words, Lincoln honored the fallen and reaffirmed the Union's purpose. That government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. In 1864, despite the war dragging on, Lincoln was re-elected. Victory was now in sight. On March 4, 1865, during his second inauguration, he delivered another powerful speech, this time urging compassion and healing. But fate had other plans. Just 5 days after Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox, Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington. There, on April 14, 1865, he was shot by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer. He died the next morning, becoming the first U.S. president to be assassinated. His death was a national tragedy. Today, Lincoln's words echo through history. His legacy lives on, not just in monuments or textbooks, but in the values that continue to shape America: equality, democracy, and the unbreakable strength of unity.